a place for conversations. SDAQ&A. You're safe to speak your truth. Common ground, shared beliefs with lots of room for disagreement. Tell us all what you believe and let us see if we can challenge you. From all paths coming here to share their stories. Some have left this global church, some remain and defend her. Where are you on the path? Does Ellen still appeal to you? SDAQ&A, you are welcome here. 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 Oh, SDAQ&A, you are welcome here. SDAQ&A, you You love me so much more than I could ever know. Your love is deeper than this world will ever show. And all of life's beauty shines around this moment now. The sky and the cliffs, they seem to change my life somehow. And I will never be the same. Will never be the same. Whoa, I will never be the same. Never be the same ever again. Well, here I am waiting, Lord, my life is just for you. Please unfold all the plans that you would have me do. And if all the world's just a breath and nothing's here to stay, and all of the love we feel will save us anyway. And I will never be the same. Will never be the same. Whoa, I will never be the same. Will never be the same.
And God's will is simple. The most wretched man in hell will not be Adolf Hitler. The most wretched man in hell, or woman, will not be one like Joe Stalin or some of these more modern devils. The most wretched person in hell will be a former Seventh-day Adventist.
Hello to all you former Seventh-day Adventists, current Seventh-day Adventists, Wish-Ventists, Prog-Ventists, Trad-Ventists, all aspects of the spectrum, to another SDAQ&A. Good to have you here. Fans blowing away in the background. It's quite a hot day. Good to have you here. Today's program is a beauty. This is a replay of Season 2, Episode 38. I invite you today to really listen to the content, because Dr. Denis Fortin will be talking, setting a scene, and then bang, out comes the most mind-blowing, explosive comment, and then back to talking. One of the things I really respect about Dr. Denis Fortin is, I think still, but at the time of this recording, he was employed by the Seventh-day Adventist Church, and his comments and interview with me in many ways was quite a risk for him. A lot of Season 2, where there are 86 conversations and interviews, a lot of the people I spoke to were retired and were a little bit more open in their thoughts and their expressions of ideas. And that is why I was really impressed, and still am, with Dr. Denis Fortin. He's been on the show a couple of times since and never ceases to amaze. I respect this man very much, and I know you will really look forward to this program today. Good to see everybody in the chat. Please keep your comments coming. I love it. And yes, David writes, just call us Christians, Peter. Yes. I love the notion of being your own person. A lot of people, when I first left the church, which is coming up to 10 years ago in a few weeks, people would say, oh, you know, you're still really an Adventist at heart, or would label me as an ex-Adventist or former Adventist. And honestly, within a couple of years of leaving the church, it felt like I'd taken off the Seventh-day Adventist jacket, and underneath was me, flawed, you know, still the same, good, bad, flawed, all the things. And once I returned to my identity, even though I had been a fifth generation Seventh-day Adventist, once I found my core again, I realized that I had never been a Seventh-day Adventist. It was a jacket imposed on me that, when I finally took it off, liberated me to just be my own self, warts and all. That's why I hesitate to make belief claims, because we're all on a journey to use our grey matter, to use our brains, and to draw our own conclusions. I really enjoyed my chat yesterday with Clifford Goldstein last night, very late last night, actually. My glasses are fogging up. It's so steamy over here. Very humid day. And I think a lot of people were hoping I would try and challenge some of his ideas. I did want to get to a lot of questions that people had, but we ran out of time, and I was very keen to find out if he agreed with my theory that progressive Adventists, when push comes to shove, aren't really Adventists. And they might like to call themselves Adventists, but their theology is so different to the actual in-writing beliefs of Adventism. And people say, well, the 28 fundamentals are very... No, they're not very accurate and align with both traditional and progressive. They're watered down to just make everybody think, oh, Adventism, we're the same as the normal Christian movement. We just worship on the Sabbath, don't eat meat, have the health message. No, the reality is that the Seventh-day Adventist Church is deeply focused on seeking salvation by legalistic methods. And no matter how much they say, oh, it's a righteousness boom and viewed on cross and no, you scratch a little bit below the surface and you realize that, for example, one day the Sabbath will be a test and will determine your salvation if you keep it or not. The Adventist Church lives as if it is still under the old covenant. They're very, very similar to the Pharisees. So it was good to chat to Clifford Goldstein. I enjoyed his personality and feel that he and I found common ground, agreeing that progressive Adventism actually unravels Adventist doctrine. The progressives are a new thing, a whole new theology. Guys, go and start your own regional conferences. But the biggest thing I like to encourage and cajole the gospel progressive Adventists into doing is to just be more open and public with your belief claims. And I appreciate the traditional Adventists who are, like Clifford, very willing to say, come on, you guys, what makes you tick? Why are you still Adventists? You've thrown away all the core doctrines and twisted them and watered them down. But the progressive Adventist rarely speaks publicly. And again, back to today's program and interview with Dr. Denis Fortin. That's what he does. At the time of the interview, he was employed and with the church and just spoke freely and shared his thoughts. And I really appreciated that. So I know you will really enjoy today's program. Thanks, everybody, also for your support. And where's that little thing I wanted to bring up? If you'd like to make a donation to the channel, there's the PayPal. And yeah, it really helps. If you send me a couple of dollars, I actually really rely on the donations coming in from you guys. Thank you so much. I put a fair bit of time into the channel, and I love every minute of it, but I do really rely on your support. So thank you for that. And I've made a little tiny fun AI offering plate with the details in there. So maybe during this 20-second clip, you might like to lean forward and make a $2 donation at PayPal, or just simply click the like button, the subscribe button. That really helps too. And making comments during and after a program really helps too. So thank you, and let's get into today's program. If you're listening on the podcast, we're going back in, you'll be thinking we are back in 2020. Those watching now, we are going back in time 6 years and finally getting this incredible content up there on a public arena. And so please enjoy this incredible conversation and try and watch closely. Though I do enjoy the chat that sometimes goes way into other realms, you'll benefit today from the magical gems that just come out every now and again. Okay, here we go. Dr. Denis Fortin. Hi, and welcome to another SDAQ&A. I am Peter Dixon, your host for this evening, and my very special guest is Dr. Denis Fortin. Hi, Denis. Good to have you with us.
Good evening to you. Good morning to me.
Yes. We just were talking, and it's 6 o'clock where you are, so it's dark. And it's just gone 8 o'clock p.m. here, so it's dark. So we're both in the dark.
Okay. That's
always
good for you.
It's always good to start an interview in the dark. Now, when I first chatted to you, I said, Denis, hi Denis, and you very correctly informed me that it's Denis, which is French, French Canadian. And is that where you're at right now? Are you still? Oh no, you're in Andrews now.
That's right. Yeah.
But your home is from Canada.
That's right. Yes, I'm from Quebec City in Canada.
Ah, nice. I've got some very good friends that are from Quebec. They're not Adventists. They moved out here about 17 years ago.
Okay. Yes.
And yeah. Now, you're currently Professor of Historical Theology at Andrews University.
That's right. Yeah.
I thought we'd kick off with you just telling us a little bit about that, and then I just want to explore some of your history. So tell us a little bit about your day-to-day working as the Professor of Historical Theology and what it is exactly. Now, just doing a quick interruption there, I wanted to remind everybody and share with everybody that today's program is sponsored by Test the Prophet, his YouTube channel. And by now, many of you will know the sad news that Test the Prophet has passed away only a couple of days ago. And I came back from my trip away and found out within an hour or two that John C. Yerma had passed away. A much loved and regular contributor in the comments, both here on YouTube and Facebook. John C. Yerma had passed away. And then literally the next day got news that Test the Prophet has passed away. And this program, a long time ago, Test asked me if he could sponsor today's program. And I am honoring that. And isn't it incredible that literally a day or two after his passing, this was slated to go on air today. So, yeah, Rodrigo Custodio and I will be doing a tribute program this time next week. So join us then, where we will talk all things Test the Prophet. But he is sponsoring the program today, and every now and again I will be referring to that and bringing up this slide here. And I do encourage you to simply go to YouTube, type in Test the Prophet. It's in my top 3 favorite channels for this kind of content. I think there's 5 fairly long programs on there. I have listened to them all many, many times, and you find something new every time. So back to the program. But yes, condolences to Test the Prophet's family and friends. A really sad loss. I got to meet him last year, I think it was February. My goodness. And what an incredible human. So back to the program. But yeah, Test the Prophet. Go and check out his channel. Let's keep that legacy alive, and the resources that he has compiled, let's spread them far and wide.
Historical theology is a discipline of the theological sciences, of theological spectrum here, that combines both history and theology. So I specialize in studying the development of doctrines, the development of ideas, of movements through time. But for me particularly, I focus on the modern period. So anything post-Reformation until today, a lot into the 19th century, of course, because that's very much the roots of Adventism. That's basically my specialty. So when I teach a couple doctrinal subjects here at the seminary for the Master of Divinity students, the students who are preparing themselves to be pastors. And I teach doctrine of the Holy Spirit, doctrine of salvation, doctrine of the church. And in each one of these doctrines, I love just to do a historical development of the ideas regarding these doctrines, how they came about, why do we believe today what we believe, and what was the development of some of those ideas through time. So that's my specialty. That's what I do most. Yes.
And I guess what's your favorite aspect of that for yourself, not for the teaching of it, what for your own personal gratification?
Certainly the doctrine of salvation for me has become something that is very dear to my heart. And I'm sure we'll talk more about some of these subjects because they impact a lot, the Glacier View, Desmond Ford, and many other things attendant to all of this. So to me, that has been my favorite subject, really, although I love all the other ones too. And I would say also that I owe a lot of gratitude to George Knight. You interviewed him about 2 weeks ago, I believe, and George Knight has had has been a major mentor to me in the world of ideas, how to understand salvation, and perhaps I've picked up a lot of concepts and ideas from him as well. And he is also a historical theologian, but has focused much more restrictively on the Seventh-day Adventist perspective of ideas. I do a little bit broader than that.
Yeah, he was very good at just reminding people of the context. And I guess what you're doing is not only studying that historical like historical Adventism and history with salvation, etc., etc. You're interested in history all around that time period, which gives you an even bigger context. So it's one thing to look at Ellen White in the context of herself and her immediate surroundings, whereas you're kind of extending that, I guess. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. For me, extending it would mean we believe some concepts regarding salvation, for example. Now, we're not the only ones to believe that. Some of those, like justification by faith, for example. So where does that come from? What's the history of this concept of justification by faith? Sanctification, the same thing, the work of the Holy Spirit in someone's life. We're not the only ones to say some of the things we say regarding this. So where do these ideas come from? What's their origins in Scripture? And how have people through time understood those concepts? So try to join together all of these strands when I talk about the doctrine of salvation.
I got the impression when I chatted to George, and it was funny, it was the last probably 20 minutes of the interview. He said, "Oh, I kind of get where you're coming from now." And he really softened. And the last 20 minutes was a very warm exchange. I think he was thinking that I was asking a lot of these questions for myself and I needed to understand. But in many ways, I was trying to find out why he believed those things and how he would defend them, not so much answer them.
I remember that moment in the interview when that happened. Yes.
Oh, good. I'm glad someone noticed it. And it made me think, oh, I wish we could go back and have that conversation again. So in some ways we can do that here. I am very interested, of course, in the big questions and the questions of Adventism and how Ellen White nestles into all of that and the context and everything. But I'm also very interested in talking to people about why they believe what they believe and how they would defend those positions. So yeah, I'm very much looking forward to unpacking more of that. I just want to make a quick announcement while I think of it. I want to thank people who've been making some donations towards what I'm doing. I added up the other day, I've spent over 200 hours on SDAQ&A alone in the last 2 months. And it's been fabulous. I've really loved it. And I've set up a group called Inside Scoop for those within the group. It's hard for me to keep track of people who've made some donations because there are different platforms people are making them. Not that there's that many. I'm not saying it's pouring in, but I've just wanted to make a quick public announcement that if you have made a donation, please let me know because I want to add you to the Inside Scoop. I'm going to be posting some interesting documents that we've discovered from some PDFs of Des Ford's, some interesting interviews, pre-interviews, that kind of thing. Sorry to interrupt the program there, Denis, with that, but sometimes it's better to say it live than in a message. Sometimes people don't see that. And it's a fantastic little group. There's going to be some really interesting information I'm sharing there. So tell us a little bit about how you came across the group here, the SDAQ&A group, because I'm loving that it's attracting a lot of people that are real thinkers and people that are really keen to unpack stuff. And you've been very bold in a lot of what you've said, and I really value that and appreciate that kind of clarity. And you don't seem to be the kind of person that's easily offended or easily troubled or worried about what people say or think. So how did you stumble across the group?
I'm not sure. It was 2 or 3 weeks ago, probably, maybe in the context of George Knight's interview.
Yeah.
I've seen his name pop up somewhere in the conversation, and that led me to your site. And since then, I've been watching, some of the interviews you've done and getting acquainted with that. Of course, the whole subject of the 40th anniversary of the Glacier View event is an important one in Adventism, at least in recent Adventism. And so I've learned a lot as I've listened to some of the interviews that you've done. I think that's how I stumbled across how it happened. Yes.
We've got a bit of feedback coming in there. Yeah, well, I'm glad you did. Can you tell us a little bit about were you born a Seventh-day Adventist? Tell us about your Adventist history and your education. And family life as well.
Sure. Let me see here. Just like George Knight, I've got my library right around me, so I can pull up books that I want to use as prop and illustrations here. No, I was not born.
He was getting them from all different directions.
He was. No, I was not born a Seventh-day Adventist. I was born into a nominal, what we would call probably a nominal cultural Roman Catholic family in Quebec. My parents did not go to church. My grandmother did. But from early days in my own journey, in my own life in primary school, I had an interest in religious things. And when our teachers would teach us the faith, the Catholic faith, the stories of the Bible, the stories of Jesus and the gospel and so on, I was really fascinated by all of this. So when in beginning of third grade, when one of the local priests came into our school and invited any of us boys if we wanted to be altar boys, my hand went up. I said, yes, I'd love to be an altar boy for my local parish in Quebec City. And so I was an altar boy for about 5 years. Did all the services there for the Catholic parish there where I lived, from Easter to Christmas to funerals to baptisms to marriages, weddings. I think I did them all for that period of about 5 years. So from third grade until about eighth grade, I was an altar boy. Then, like all teenagers, drifted away. Didn't feel like it was as important anymore, or needed perhaps to distance and find my own way. But that did not mean I was no longer interested into spiritual things. Somehow I came across a small New Testament, and I was reading it while I was in high school and first years of college. It's at about the same time, so we talk about here mid-1970s, 75 thereabout, that the Seventh-day Adventist Church in the province of Quebec decided to put on the air in the local TV stations the It Is Written television show, but in French. So it was not George Vandeman being dubbed into French. It was a French pastor in the same studio where George Vandeman was filming his own shows back there in Montreal. And so I began to listen to It Is Written every week, as faithfully as I could, Sunday at noon there on my local TV station. And that's how I got acquainted with Seventh-day Adventism somehow. At the end of the show, if you remember, the pastor invites people to write in, to call in, to ask for a brochure or whatever Bible study guide of some kind. And then finally, 1 week after watching this for a number of months, I think, I got a piece of paper, an envelope, and a stamp, and I wrote in to ask for one of those brochures. And so I got it and began to study this little series of Bible studies. That's basically what it was. So we're talking about 75, 76, thereabout. And then now my name is in a database, so to speak. And then one day I get the visit of somebody who comes to my door. I happen to be home. It's about supper time or a little after. And I did not know at the time, but it was the local church pastor of the Seventh-day Adventist Church, who had just started a new church, at least in a new church building, about 5 city blocks from where I lived. So he came, and then before he left, he gave me this little book here.
Oh, wow. Oh, wow.
Steps to Christ.
Little did you know then.
That's right. That's right. So he gave me this little book. This is the very one here. Steps to Christ in French, of course. And that's the first Seventh-day Adventist book that I read. It was about Jesus, salvation. Honestly, though, at my age, I was about 16, 17, when I got this little book. At my age, with the education I had, half the book was incomprehensible to me. The vocabulary, the thought processes, the context, what is this little book about? I am not too sure. But when we get to the later part of the book, the last half of the book, the chapters are a whole lot more practical. What to do with how to get a better knowledge of God, a beautiful chapter on prayer, a chapter on doubt, and so on. And all of a sudden, these little chapters meant a whole lot more to me because they were very, very practical. So that was my journey. About a year later, I think after I got this first visit from the pastor, I got an invitation to attend a series of lectures on the Passion Week. It was at the time of Easter, so beginning of April. And I was in college at the time, could not attend to many of these meetings in the evening, but I noticed that the last of these meetings was on a Saturday morning at 11 o'clock. And so I decided to go to that meeting, which was the very last one of that series of meeting for that 1 week. So the pastor had a meeting every night of the week for 1 week, talking about themes of the Passion Week of Jesus. And for Roman Catholics, the Passion Week, the week right before Easter, is very much of a religious revival type of week during the year. So I went to the last one, and that's basically my early contacts with Adventists. I was a late teen, 17, 18 when that happened, and that's how I began attending a Seventh-day Adventist church. Within a few months, maybe 6 or a little less, I was baptized into the church. A year later, so the fall of 78, I went to Canadian Union College. Now it's called Burman University in Alberta, Canada. And I began my studies in religious studies. I thought that being a pastor teaching what I had learned would be a beautiful thing to do. And I really loved teaching all along. I wanted to be a teacher from very early in my life. And so I went to CUC then, that's how we called it then. And that's how I began my journey. Yeah.
Wow, that's fascinating.
So this little book, Steps to Christ, therefore, is very precious to me.
A friend of mine is a Frenchman, and when we were both quite young, we would read lots of Asterix and Obelix books.
Oh, yes.
And he would be there reading them in French, and I would be reading mine in English. And he delighted in pointing out that the French version of these books was much funnier, because the French language was able to delve into subtleties that the English language couldn't. So I wonder, did you find that you've read both versions of Steps to Christ? Have you found the French translation a little bit more subtle and more beautiful than the English version?
You know, it's in my original language, in my mother tongue. So yes, to some extent, there's some beauty there. But by now, I've read it a whole lot more many times in English than I have in French. So I couldn't say that there's something that I've noticed that is better in French than in English.
Right. Are there much differences in the two?
No, I don't think so.
No. He would point out to me lots of puns that weren't in the English that were there in the French, and I just thought that was very interesting.
No, but you see, Steps to Christ was written in English first and then translated.
And translated. And what I was wondering though is if the person that was the French translator imbued some of the beauty of the French language of his own into it.
Likely it did.
Yeah.
We could talk about another subject as to how the translations of Ellen White's books have some peculiarities.
Yes.
But let's see where the conversation goes there.
Okay. Well, I definitely want it to go there. A lot of people who have joined the group that are currently working for the church have hesitated sometimes in commenting and giving some of their views, putting some of their views forward. You seem to have been quite open with lots of your thoughts. Why do you think that is?
I think there's a journey that anybody goes through in life, and for me, as a teacher of theology within an Adventist context, and just like George Knight, I am not born within the church. I became a Seventh-day Adventist out of free will and free choice. And I don't have the history within the church that many other people have, that many of my colleagues perhaps have within the theological field and professors of religious studies all over our institutions. So I became a Seventh-day Adventist. And for me, as a teacher of theology, perhaps also simply as an academic professor, integrity and honesty are important to me, and just like it should be for anybody. And as I grew within Adventism in the last 40-some years now, I have realized through my studies of some of the issues that we needed perhaps a little bit more candidness, a little bit more honesty, and a little bit more integrity in admitting some of the facts and some of the issues that we've dealt with and that some people have pointed out and probably got into hot waters for it and into trouble for it. But in the end, they were right in pointing out what they did. And it does not hurt to be honest, even though perhaps some people may not love the honesty. So I have tried to do my teaching as a professor and being honest at the same time when I teach, not brushing over some issues and not saying they're not important when they are. And yet at the same time, keeping up the faith, keeping up a sense of encouragement, a sense of this is good, there's beauty here, yet at the same time, here's perhaps a weakness that needs to be highlighted, or at least mentioned. So I think that has been important to me. And given a number of the issues that we've had to deal with in the last 10 years, regarding women's ordination, or regarding maybe some other issues too, to me it has become important to say, wait a minute, folks, here, the way you're acting, the way you're saying this, the way you're arguing this point, you know what? It reminds me of this or that, perhaps 500 years ago, perhaps 1,000 years ago. And, this is the same behavior. This is the same kind of line of arguments. And you're saying you're not like this, but wait a minute, perhaps you are. Yes, perhaps I've been noted to be a little bit more too candid sometimes, be that as it may. I think it's important for Adventism to have a dosage of honesty once in a while. And maybe we are at the time when this needs to be said in some ways, particularly in relationship to the ordination of women, the compliance committees that have come up with also in the last 5 years or so, this whole series of events that have happened within our church, some honesty needed to be pointed out. So I did. Not alone. I'm not alone to have done that, but I certainly wanted to perhaps say my piece.
Who else has spoken up that's still employed?
Well, I think a fair number of us who were on the Theology of Ordination Study Committee, the TOSC, a number of us who were on that committee have spoken up and have mentioned a few things. And we've said this is not proper hermeneutics, this is not proper decision processes, the way decisions are made. We are influenced by this or by that, and therefore we perhaps sound, like George Knight said a few times, perhaps a little bit more too Roman Catholic here for the likes, for what we like. So no, I've not been alone. Many of my colleagues on the Study of Ordination Study Committee, the TOSC, many of us have spoken out. Yes.
Did you find that the TOSC committee was steered at all to come to certain conclusions?
Honestly, no, I don't think so. I think when the committee got together, we had 4 meetings over a period of 2 years. So January, June, for 2 years, and the 2 years before the GC session of 2015. So in 2013 and 2014. And there was about 105 of us on this committee. It was a very odd committee, because it was not made up of administrators and theologians alone, but it was made up of a fair number of lay persons who simply had an interest into this, and layperson who, with good hearts, of course, and a lot of keen interest, but had perhaps a difficulty navigating a theological conversation or an exegesis conversation about text and culture and history and Greek and Hebrew and so on. And so that it made the conversation on the committee a little odd at times. and you could tell that you were on different levels. Was it steered to come to a particular conclusion? No, I don't think so. I think it was composed on purpose, though, to have just about an even number of people who had already shown their cards to be either pro-ordination or not pro-ordination, or against ordination of women. And I think at the beginning, we were probably a good 50-50 there, or 40-60 when it came to that. And so, but as the conversations continued to happen in the committee, then it was obvious that we came to be divided into three groups. A group that favored ordination, a group that did not favor ordination at all, and then there was a group in the middle that would say, we don't really favor ordination, but it's not a key doctrine of Adventism, it is not a fundamental belief, it is a matter of policy. And so that third middle ground group there basically said, while we personally would not favor ordination or vote for it, we don't mind a particular region of the church to go ahead and do ordination if they see it that way, that it would be beneficial for the mission of the church in their part of the world. So at the very end, when the votes were taken, and we had 1/3 saying no ordination at all under any circumstances, and then you had 2/3 of the group who said, yes, ordination is okay within a region. If that region would like to have it, it would be fine. It's not a matter that should divide us, so to speak. And so it was 1/3, 2/3. It was therefore, a good majority there of people. So we thought that with that kind of an approach, to allow the divisions and the unions of our church all over the world to go ahead and to do their own study and to come to their own conclusions when it came to ordination. We thought that this was the way to cut the Gordian knot, so to speak, and to allow the church to proceed with its mission, valuing women in the areas of the church where it is felt very important to do that, and to do it in whichever way that part of the field would like to do this. We thought that we had arrived at a very, very good solution. But as you know, when we got to the GC session in 2015, things went a very, very different way. It was politicized immediately in no uncertain terms. The West against Western ideas against biblical ideas, so to speak, liberals versus conservatives, whatever those terms mean, and heretics against those who are faithful to Scripture, and so on. It was politicized, it was categorized, and we ended up with what we had. We ended up with Elder Paulson being booed there at the BC session, which was very, very unfortunate. But it showed the spirit of the movement, that it had. It was no longer a question of let's talk together and let's make a decision. It had become now, you're right, you're wrong, you're going to hell, you're going to heaven, you're a proper Adventist, you're not a proper Adventist. And that was unfortunate. So was it steered at the beginning? That's your question. Was it steered to go that way? No, I don't think so. I think the conversation was genuine and it was honest and it was fair. But in the end, it became a political ball. So
when the ball had gotten out of the committee and you'd kind of come to your conclusions and perhaps settled on it being a good idea to let the unions and the different parts of the world decide, which is actually what Ellen White the reason she set up the unions was for that very kind of thing. Was Ted Wilson then perhaps kind of encouraging those who were seeing it as a heaven or hell issue?
That might be too strong of a language there. You should not quote me on that. But
was he supportive of the side? So there's the three sides. I'll just say from my view of watching a lot of the vision of it, not the vision, the footage. um, he seemed to be supporting those that were very much against women's ordination. Is that a fair
Oh,
call?
that's a fair, and I think he came to the process understanding the issue that way, and I don't think the process helped him change his mind. He was of that mind from the get-go, and I think he did not want to see women's ordination being voted by the church, and that's it. Yes, that's a fair depiction.
Was he on the committee? Who was chairing the TOSC committee?
The task was chaired by two of the vice presidents, Jeffrey Mbwana from Africa, and then Arthur Stille from Russia.
Okay.
They were the two co-chair, and very even chairs, well organized, good behavior, good chairmanship. Nothing to say there. Both of them were excellent. It was well done. Was Ted there yet? Ted was there for all 4 meetings.
Okay.
As were a few other administrators as well.
It seems like the opportunity of a really great step forward was offered to the church to say, hey, let's decide based on your subcultural part of the world, what's best for you guys. At what point do you, because people the committee that you were on, TOSC, that's obviously a committee that was well respected. The presentations that you guys gave were sanctioned from the highest levels. So it's out there in the field. At what point does someone get involved with lobbying it to go one way or the other? Like, was there lobbying going on for a no vote, or was it just people's own conscience that came?
So just a reminder that today's program is sponsored by Test the Prophet. As I've said, many of you know already that sadly Test has passed away just a day or two ago, and the timing of this, he had well and truly 6 to 9 months ago requested that he sponsored this particular program, and there's a couple coming up as well in the future that he asked to sponsor, and so I'm honoring that. And of course his channel will go down in history as being one of the most incredible challenging Ellen G. White platforms ever. And I encourage you all to go and check it out. You just simply type in to YouTube, Test the Prophet, and it's the first one that pops up. And I encourage you all to go and check it out. And Denis Fortin, I just asked him an important question about the lobbying of the San Antonio no vote, and let's go back and see what his answer is.
Came to play.
Oh, there were certainly lobbies going on, people publishing books and booklets, and
were there any lobbying for a yes vote? Was there lobbying, or did you kind of feel like the third option was going to be voted in for sure, so there wasn't a need for much lobbying?
I don't think there was much need. I mean, we at the seminary here at Andrews University, we prepared a revised edition of a book on ordination. We had it ready before the GC session. So yes, on our part we did, and I think the Trans-European Division also did a couple books. So the yes side and the no side, everybody published something in those years. It was really, really happening a great deal from all over the place. So I don't think that there's one side that lobbied more than the other.
Okay.
I think it was fair to say that a lot of it happened. So we put our hearts into this. Myself and a number of other colleagues,
Mm.
we wrote papers on various points of the ordination. First of all, what is ordination? And then second, ordination of women. And we did we consumed a lot of time writing these articles, these chapters, these presentations, trying to be as articulate and convincing and honest as possible. And so we really put our heart into it. And when in the end, I'll be candid a little bit here with you and the audience. In the end, when some of us saw how things proceeded thereafter, and how the work of our committee for 2 years was basically summarily dismissed once it was ended. Many of us, I think, went through what we would call spiritual depression of some kind.
Mm.
For a year or two, it was really hard to understand what's going on in my church and why are things politicized in this way and why are things articulated this way. It was hard. And I speak for myself, but I know a fair number of my other colleagues. And for a number of us, we went through this depression, spiritual depression, for at least a good year before we were rebalanced a little bit and were able to breathe and come out and be able to swim a little better. It was hard. But I realized one thing, and that led me to write a number of articles since then, is that reflecting back on all of this that happened, I began to realize that my church, even though it tries to distinguish itself from some other churches, when it comes to some hot topics and hard conversation, I realized that my church in some ways is acting up like some other churches have acted up in the past. And, we pride ourselves to have a beautiful system of administration and a functioning church manual and church policies and so on. And we love committees, which is a strand or an aspect of a Presbyterian form of church government. But honestly, our church is an Episcopal church. We function very similarly to the way Anglicans function, very similarly to the way that United Methodists here in the United States function, even though we have a vocabulary and committees like Presbyterians do. Our system of governance is really an Episcopal one. We call our presidents, not bishops, but many of them act like bishops, and they are in charge of their local fields. And we are very much of a hierarchical structure where every structure that is above one is determinative and can tell the lower ones what to do and how to think and what to accept and how to do things and so on. That is an Episcopal form of church government. And sometimes our bishops, quotation marks here, our bishops are making decisions for the rest of the church, or they are influencing very strongly how the rest of the church should think and how it should behave and what it should vote and not vote, accept and not accept. And I think that's a critique that needs to be heard, is that we need to be careful here. And I think one of George Knight's latest books, not the last one that just came out, but about 2 years ago, he wrote one on the temptation of authority. And that's where it comes from. When we have leaders who have that kind of an influence and that kind of power to make decisions and to influence committees to make decisions because they have an idea and they want to see it through. This is a form of church government that goes back hundreds of years. And even though we've spoken a lot against it, we're beginning to look like it. And that's dangerous. So,
and that's why your insight's valuable, because your very field of expertise is in going, hey, let's look at this so that we can not repeat some of
That's right.
the hazard, the errors that have occurred.
Mhm.
Do you think that we're at a point where ordination is now being used as a tool to suppress women
Uh,
by some of the bishops?
uh, I can speak for North America. I can speak probably for Europe as well, um, and probably Australia. Although I've not been there, so I wouldn't be able to say there. And I've not been there recently, I mean, so I wouldn't be able to give a fair opinion of your field. But as far as North America is concerned and Europe is concerned, no, not at all. I think women are being valued. Women in ministry are being valued. They're being hired to do ministry, not only chaplaincy type of ministry, not only associate pastor type of ministry, but senior leadership ministry in some districts, in larger churches, and so on. I think here in North America, women in ministry are very valued. Here at the seminary, in our Master of Divinity program, so the program to prepare pastors for ministry, I would say that 20% to 25% of our students are women. Now, they're not all preparing for pastoral ministry. Many of them want to do chaplaincy, but be that as it may, they're preparing for pastoral ministry of some kind. And so we are really encouraging that here in North America. Having said that, it is true that a fair number of our women pastors are still having a number of issues right here in North America, where you will find church members who will say to them somewhat very straightforward sometimes, the church has decided not to ordain women to ministry. You should not be a pastor. You should not be an elder. I hear anecdotes of this, perhaps too often, of women being subjected to this kind of harassment in some churches, where you have members, church leaders, perhaps local church leaders, I mean by that, who do not favor women in ministry, preaching on Sabbath morning or being in a senior leadership position. So it is happening. Not all women have an easy job here in North America. There's gender discrimination, certainly, that is happening. And if the vote in San Antonio had not been so polarized and so divisive in the way it was handled, I think all of this could have been avoided.
I really expected at the time, because I mean, it was the straw that broke the camel's back for me, and it was within a year that I announced my last Sabbath as a Seventh-day Adventist, and I, at that moment, received lots of emails from people from all over the world, and just there was a lot of anger coming through, not at me, but that no vote had happened. And I was half expecting a bit of a Sister Rosa moment to occur, where women were going to say, right, we're not going to take this anymore. Is it in Norway, Denmark, 1971, early 70s, the women were like sick to death of not having equal pay, and the equality wasn't exactly shining on them. And so they went on a strike. That I vaguely remember reading a story about that.
I think it was Finland.
Finland, was it? And within one week of the strike, lots of things started to shift, and within a year, the equal pay was in. There was a much better financial offerings to women who had children and for childcare, etc. So I was sitting there after the Antonio vote, and I thought, wow, what I'm feeling from women is we're not going to take it anymore. We have had enough. Because some women have been fighting for 60 years in support of, this kind of equality for women. But it didn't quite happen. What do you think? What was it that kind of stopped it from going to the Sister Parks moment where I'm not going to go to the back of the bus?
Again, I think Adventists, regardless of the issues that we may have between ourselves and the brotherly fights we may have, Adventists are very committed to the mission of the church, to preach the gospel all over the world, but particularly in my own little corner, in my neighborhood, in my town where I live. And after San Antonio, I think a lot of people realized that this issue was very divisive, it was very harsh, it was very hurting to a lot of people, and perhaps we should refocus on the mission of the church and do what really matters. You don't need to be ordained to do that. You can go ahead and do it. And a lot of ladies thought that way. They didn't want to fight anymore. And they went on and did their ministry. Maybe that's what happened. But the focus on the mission of the church was certainly a strong one.
I know.
Yeah.
Sorry, I know.
But like you, though, Peter, hundreds, if not thousands, of young adults and older adults, Seventh-day Adventist boomers and so on, drifted and left the church in that year or two right after San Antonio. You're not alone. Hundreds of people. I know of pastors, I know of students here, I know of church members here and there and everywhere who basically drifted. They didn't write a letter to their local church, please drop my name off the books, because that is not a concern of anybody anymore, whether you're on a book or not. They just drifted. Hundreds of them drifted. I was surprised that the tithe was not that impacted by this drifting away. It kind of remained fairly strong. But I know that happened. So the Rosa Park moment was basically a silent one. People walking with their feet and just leaving the church. A lot of that happened. I know it happened here in my community extensively.
Yeah.
Yes.
I felt that the total member involvement, and this is again just my opinion, that Ted Wilson then wheeled out was almost a kind of a bit of a smokescreen and a bit convenient. It was a very good opportunity to remind people of what the mission really was, and let's focus on that. And ladies, let's not get too involved with this kind of fighting, because that will disrupt the mission. You don't have to comment on that, but I just wanted to throw that in there.
I won't comment.
Yeah, no comment. When we look at the compliance document, I'm very interested in you must have been a little bit shocked as you saw at the Autumn Council again, Jan Paulsen almost dismissed with his comments, a last rallying of some of the liberal voices, and the poor Danish, Norwegian guys getting told off and wrist slapped publicly. As a historian, you've seen this happen before, and so maybe you can see over the hill a little bit. Is the future going to look so bright for Adventism and the wonderful acceptance of women in some parts of the North American division if the warnings turn to reprimands and the reprimands turn to sanctions and the trickle-down effect happens?
Yes, I've seen this before in church history, of course, of issues coming to the point where they become divisive and where disciplinary actions need to be taken. A number of churches are going through that at the moment. Non-Adventist churches are going through that when it comes to ordination of women, ordination of gays, or even having gay church members. So here in North America, it's a hot button issue, but it's also a political one, of course, as if you hear the news of what's happening in the government at the federal level, that's part of it. Adventism reflects very, very much how the government goes to a lot of extent. We want to say that's not happening, but yes, it is happening. Here in the United States, we are perhaps just a few years beyond what's happening in American politics. Compliance committees, I think personally, of course I was fairly worked up by them when I heard about them, when I saw what was happening, but to me that was immediately, there we go. I mean, here's the best example of an Episcopal form of church government, where you've got a small committee of church leaders, the highest of the bishops in the church, who are getting together, putting together some concepts and some disciplinary process to slap the hands or dismiss even from some functions some of the other church leaders or pastors or church members. And to me, that was one of just the best examples of what is happening here. And we are really, really going down that route. We are flexing our muscles as an Episcopal form of church government. But I think that there is a Presbyterian impulse within our church that is so strong, and that will that will not let this process go any further than it has at the moment. I do not see these compliance committees having any life, anything happening out of them. I don't see that happening. I think they're going to die a natural death, and it's going to be the way it is. I predict that if these compliance committees are pushed ahead once the GC session is over next year, and if they're resurrected again, if they're pushed ahead, we're going to have a schism in our church. Mark my words. There are some parts of this world church that are not going to be told by a higher organization how to function and how to do ministry in their local fields. That's the work of the unions. That's how, and that is why we have unions. And I predict that if this goes too far, a number of our unions are going to be independent, so to speak. They will remain Seventh-day Adventist, but they will no longer send tithe up to the division or to the higher levels. And money speaks much more than anything else in our church. I predict that this will happen. So I think people are beginning to see the wisdom of this warning, because it has been voiced a number of times in private, in some committees. It's been voiced publicly, of course. I have voiced it, but I know that some people are listening. And so to me, they're going to die.
Dan Jackson has definitely alluded to that in some very clear,
Yes,
not so subtle statements about fiscal future.
that's right.
The difference with you and I think every single person I've interviewed in this series, which is really season 2 of SDAQ&A, is that you guys think it's not going to happen. We both predict the same outcome. You're just saying if it happens, and I'm saying when it happens. And we both hope that I'm not right, but I feel a little bit like the Dutch boy with his finger in the dike going, am I the only one really seeing that this is inevitable? Not that I get into a bit of flack when I say that. I don't mean it to be negative. I'm trying to rally the troops to action.
Yes.
People in the liberal kind of camp, and you've seen comments whenever we talk about liberal and conservative, like liberals say, well, what kind of liberal do you mean? We're generalizing here. But people in the liberal camp don't seem to have any coordinated efforts to making and hanging on to their version of Adventism, whereas the conservatives seem to have a real organised structure. They've got very organised networks. They've got the president of the Adventist Church behind them. They've got money. They know where to put the money. What do you think it's going to take to galvanise the liberal movement into action instead of just talk?
That's a good question.
Like I would, my advice, sorry to interrupt, but my thoughts, humble muso nobody, would be the action you speak of that will happen, your prediction, if these events transpire. I'd be putting them into play now. I would have put them into play before the Autumn Council. I think now's the time to start invoking some of that financial leverage, not later. What do you think?
Perhaps. I don't know. That's a good question. Would have to think about it. There's a sense that you want the church to. You don't want to discourage church members by doing too much politics and by advocating this, that, or the other, and you want to encourage, all the church members, the young ones, the older ones, the middle-aged ones, the professionals, and the day workers. You want to encourage everybody to prepare themselves, for the second coming of Jesus, to have a good life, to live their religious life to the best of their abilities, encourage them on a day-to-day basis, week by week on Sabbath. And we realize that divisive issues can be politicized and polarized and create more havoc. And so perhaps that's what's happening here. And we'll have to wait and see. I don't know. I don't know how the liberal wing or the progressive wing could organize itself any more than it has.
Yeah, and I get the feeling that there's stuff going on behind the scenes that I'm not privy to as well. So shoot me messages behind the scenes, guys. Keep me informed. I'll be quiet. I won't say. Gillian has just written, Peter, splitting is not a solution. I need to kind of remind everyone, I'm not suggesting splitting. I'm just saying that people either will split or need to define their Adventism a little bit more clearly. And I think what you said there was quite encouraging. If the unions actually started to claim their authority, which was given to them by Ellen G. White, and started to practice that, put that authority into practice, I think that could be a really good way to kind of come up with a solution.
Perhaps. The comment you just read from Gillian there is very accurate. And, you got to say that Des Ford certainly had this beautiful trait of personality and character, that he never invited or suggested a split, a schism of some kind in response to what had happened to him or what people were supporting as far as his theology was concerned. And that is the beauty of Adventism. Even though we may have our fights, we may have our disagreements, Adventism has been able to sail through the rough waters and been able to continue to function together as one unity, as one church unit, I should say, and continue. And I think we've got church leaders all over the world who think this way, who want this to happen, and are doing their best to try to diffuse some of these hot issues in a way that will keep the church advancing and together and functioning and so on. And that's the beauty of Adventism. Many other Protestant churches would not last this long. And all kinds of schism would have happened. We've had a few schisms. It's not that we've not had any. We've had a few.
It's been
They've
breakaways.
been small. They've been small. And so we'll see.
One thing I've loved about doing these interviews is there's a camaraderie between academics and scholars, and I feel like I've been able to poke my head in and just kind of enjoy that. Like I've just had so many amazing, fun interviews, and even with people who have left, like Ron Numbers. Just had fantastic conversations. Jonathan Butler, of course, still a member of the church. And I could list a heap of names, yourself as well, where there's a camaraderie there, which I'm starting to get. And it's actually spilling out into the group, which I'm loving seeing too. There's a real, often people will I can see them writing as they join the interview, and they're saying, "Hi, I'm here," and they'll be saying hello to someone else and a hi as if they've just come into church. And it's a really nice little environment that's growing, and I'm really enjoying that camaraderie. I'm the kind of person that is happy to kind of speak up and let's do this and tear down the walls, but I just love also the camaraderie and enjoying haystacks and nice food and conversation as well. I feel we can kind of do the two in one.
Very good.
Let's just shift for a moment. I want to talk a little bit about, we just touched on Des Ford there, I want to talk a little bit about how you kind of first heard about him. And did you early on hear the 1979 Forum tape, the famous tapes that went around the world, copies of the tape? Did you hear that sermon, and what were your thoughts?
No, honestly, I've never heard it. I've read the transcript,
Okay.
but not the tape, not the audio
Yeah.
of the conversation. 1979, October 1979.
Yeah.
I was into my second year of studies at CUC there in Alberta. So I was barely, 19, 20 years old, fresh new Adventist since for about 2 years or so. All of these issues were way above my head. I had no way of relating to anything that was happening. But I do know that some things were happening on my campus. So by the time Glacier View arrived in the summer of 1980, I could tell that there was a lot of people, those who were born Adventists, who were familiar with the issues of the investigative judgment, righteousness by faith, and all these conversations that were happening, who had that as part of their DNA. We're talking a lot about this. But again, I was in somewhat of a fog. I didn't understand that. So I worked at the library at the time. That was my summer job. I worked at the library. And for a year or so, we had a new librarian who happened to be Keith Cloughton from Avondale, who had become the librarian of our little library on the campus of Canadian Union College.
What year was that?
That was, I think Keith arrived in 1979.
Yeah.
Or 1980 or thereabout. He arrived at CUC at the time of the whole Ford crisis and issue conversation.
His kids were at school with me, a class or below or ahead, I'm not sure.
Okay, sure. Sure. So he arrived, and of course he was immediately quite keen about the conversation because he likely knew Des Ford quite well, having been there on the campus at Avondale. And he was able to get a copy of the manuscript of that 900 and 1,000-page booklet there or binder that Des had prepared. He got a copy of it, and he put it on reserve at the library. Wow. I worked at the library. And so in my spare time, I would take the binder off the shelf and I would put it on the desk and flip through the pages. Well, 900 and it was 1,000 pages, I think. That's a huge amount of reading. So I could not read all of this. A lot of it was above my head too. But I knew that the local professors were reading it because they were checking it out. Some of my Bible teachers were checking out the document and were reading it and talking about it. And I did not know it at the time, but I know that a number of your interviewees referred to that. I think the interview you had with Eric Anderson brought up the concept of Nicodemus syndrome. Professors who are in sympathy, but will come out only at midnight. I know that
I like that line.
Oh, that was good. That was a very good line from him. I know now in hindsight, having talked to them since then, that they were in sympathy with Des Ford. Obviously they were. They knew of the issues that he was bringing up. They knew of the problems with perfectionism, the problem with fear, that came out of the investigative judgment, or at least the way it is being taught. And these professors really were in sympathy with what was happening here. But they feared for their jobs.
Yeah.
They had families to feed. They had kids to feed.
Yeah. And no judgment. Like, I can understand that. Yeah.
Because they knew
Yeah.
how the church functions. That some church leaders can put in their heads an idea and they will try to carry it through the committees. And a lot of committees are, agreeable and, oh, yes, sir, we'll do what you want. And they were afraid of that. I remember in one of my classes, I would have been in my senior year, so that's a good 2 years later, at least a year and a half later after Glacier View. I was taking a class on Acts and the epistles of the New Testament, an advanced senior class, and the teacher went through every one of the books of the New Testament, talked about the book, the major points, the major thoughts of the book, and the major outline, and so on. He did that for every single book of the New Testament as we went through. And we got to the book of Hebrews. And he described to us the book of Hebrews, the overall 13 chapters, and then begins to go through chapter by chapter. Here's the main thought of this chapter in the context and so on. And he stopped at chapter 6. The next day, it's not chapter 7. We've moved on to James. I am dumbfounded. Hey, this is the hot button issue. Chapters 7, 8, 9, 10 of the book of Hebrews is what everybody's talking about. Why in the world are you skipping this? Now, I was a young man and, a student, deference and so on, so I didn't ask the question, but that was the question I wanted to ask. Well, years later, I knew why. It's because he agreed with Desmond Ford.
Yeah.
And he did not want to get into hot water by a student getting out of class and going to the union or going to the president of the college and say so-and-so is teaching the same thing as Desmond Ford is, right? Raising up the same questions. And so, he just skipped over the rest of the book of Hebrews, and particularly those chapters that were so relevant to the question.
Boy, that's
that's my encounter with the whole issue.
And that would have been a very revealing encounter, because that would have alerted you to something's going on here.
That's right, yes.
I wish a lot of the liberal progressives would just say that. I just didn't want to lose my job.
Yeah, perhaps that's true.
But instead we get lots of convoluted answers and some mild attacks on Des, which I think is unfair.
Perhaps, yeah. And then, 2 years later, I ended up here at the seminary. I did my Master of Divinity as a pastor, sponsored by the Quebec Conference. By the time I arrived here in 1983, the seminary had turned strongly, a strong turn toward an apologetic response to Desmond Ford. Yeah. And the entire curriculum was changed.
What year was that again, sorry?
1983.
Yeah.
1983. So the entire curriculum was changed, and John Pauline alluded to that.
I was just going to bring his name up.
Yeah, when you interviewed him last week, he alluded to that, because he was a doctoral student at the time when I was here as a master's student. And I think, half of the curriculum had become apologetic. The classes on Ellen White, on eschatology, on salvation, everything is apologetic, trying to answer the issues raised by Desmond Ford. Some professors had been dismissed because of obvious sympathies with Desmond Ford, and others were simply quiet. And others were truly firing back, so to speak, at Desmond Ford. So my upbringing, so to speak, in Adventism in those first 5 to 10 years had a lot of apologetics, defending the faith, against all the errors that people, bring up. And that's how I was raised. That's how I was trained as a minister.
Did
So
that
to
annoy
do,
you though? Like I get really annoyed when people zip into that mode of defending.
yes. Well, let me complete the circle that we started an hour ago.
Yeah.
I was trained as an apologetic to try to defend the faith. And I realized some years ago that that is not necessarily the best way to approach some topics.
Mm.
And instead, I think we need to have some integrity
Yes.
and some honesty about some of these issues, that some of the points being raised have a valid, they're bringing up a valid point, a valid idea, and that it needs to be fairly, fairness needs to be given where it needs to be given.
Mm.
And so through the years, even though I was raised into very much of an apologetic approach to Adventist issues, in my study of Ellen White issues, in my teaching of Ellen White theology and Ellen White writings, I decided to make a change and to be less apologetic and to be a whole lot more candid. Here is what the issue is. So-and-so had a good point. He got fired for it, but he had a good point.
Does
And,
that?
and how do we relate to that now?
Are you worried that people might want to start questioning you now?
I think that has happened already, but there's you never regret honesty
No.
and fairness, and I think that's important. And I'm glad to see that there's a generation of new scholars who are obviously able to admit to some of the issues. And that's what I wanted to do with a couple of the writings that I've done in the last 10 years or so. The Ellen G. White Encyclopedia that came out in 2013, the encyclopedia, when Jerry Moon and I did it, which, by the way, was a project that George Knight started, but he knew that he wanted to retire, didn't want to spend a whole lot of time on this project. So he gave it to Jerry Moon and I.
John
And when we
Butler
did,
spoke highly of that too.
yeah, the encyclopedia, I've got it here, this book right here.
Yes.
It took us 10 years to do this book.
Well
Fairly
done.
big. About 200 authors, colleagues of ours who helped us write the book. We wanted the book to be friendly toward Ellen White, but we wanted it also to be candid about the issue. One of the longest articles in that book is the article on plagiarism.
Yeah.
And I wrote the article on plagiarism, and I wanted to admit that yes, there is an issue when it comes to Ellen White borrowing from some other authors. And here's a couple of examples of that and how she did it.
I want to come to that, and I want to hear some of these examples. I just want to just leave the Des thing for a minute with a comment that you might like to, with a statement you might like to comment on. Perhaps we shouldn't be too hard on some of the scholars and the academics, because in many ways it wasn't just a fear of losing their jobs. There was some quite mean bullying tactics that came into play at a political level. And sometimes if you're just minding your own business, wanting to kind of share ideas and have interesting discussions, and bullies come into the room, you'd be well within your rights to kind of keep your mouth shut.
That's right. Yes. And and in today's world also, the bullies are very open in their sometimes anonymous ways of writing postings on Facebook and wherever, getting emails. I mean, I've got emails from people who called me the devil. I've got letters who told me that I should be fired from my job when I was the seminary dean for some years because of some of the events we were having. And yes, it's happened. And so when there's too much bullying, if you can't take it, you kind of withdraw a little bit, and you want to keep some sanity. There's more to life than to be bullied.
I'm in another group that's a very conservative Adventist group. Some of them will be watching tonight. And one of the guys who wrote an article about me, and that spawned another pastor to share a YouTube clip. I've shared this, I think you've heard me say this one, where he said from the pulpit on YouTube that he would like to take Peter Dixon back in time and join with the prophets in throwing him off a cliff. Yeah. And so in this conservative group, just a couple of nights ago, when I became aware that the guy who'd started this article was there, I really called him out on it and called him a coward. And he was quite nasty back, and I said, "Oh yeah, typical, not able to articulate your conversation. You're just the kind of guy that like shoots and then runs, you know." Yep. And then I thought, well, there's a lot of liberal people in this group I know are quietly watching, and so I said, "Okay, you've got till midnight Friday night to support me on this publicly, or I'm going to delete you as a friend." And only about 2 did. So I'm going to spend some time tomorrow morning with a coffee, and I'm going to go through that list, delete, because I think it's time to speak up to some of these bullies. Sorry, off on a side tangent there. Well, just back to that. What kind of things do you do to say to these people when they start saying you're of the devil and stuff? You know, what's your way of?
Well, my way has
not rolling over to that.
My way has been just to give them context, to give them why we're doing this, why I'm saying this. Here's the issue in its broader perspective, in its wider context. You know, I've done that a number of issues in response to people who were angry with either things I said or events that we held here on campus. And you know what? They always have an answer back. They always have a response. They always have something that is nasty to be said, and it continues to snowball, so to speak. And I remember one time, some years ago, Dr. Andreasen, whom you interviewed as well, he was the president here on campus when one of these big issues happened. And I had written back a post, we had posted it, we had sent a reply, I had given a fairly good context, 2 or 3 paragraphs of explanation. And Dr. Andreasen said to me, the best response sometimes is simply to say, "I hear you, thank you for your comment." Do not say anything more, because the more you say, the more you give them something to respond to. There's a lot of wisdom in that from him.
Yeah, I did that for a long time. Long time. Now I'm going, you say that, I'm coming for you, buddy.
That's right.
Oh, dear.
Yeah.
Someone's just written that they would have defended me. They didn't realize. So I just need to say it was on a different group. If you're in this group, you wouldn't have even seen that conversation. It's a very conservative group that allows me to be in their group. I really quite enjoy it, actually. On that, bullying, booing Jan Paulsen, can you just tell us a little bit about that moment? Were you there when that happened on the floor?
No, I was at home. I was here at home and I was watching it online.
How did that happen? What was going on before and after that?
Well, it was at the moment of listening to comments, pro or con, regarding the vote that was to be taken. And the vote was, should we allow local fields, divisions, unions of the World Church to make their own decisions regarding women's ordination? And so he came to the mic. And in essence, in the 2 or 3 minutes he was given to speak, he basically said, "Come on, folks, we're a big church. And over the years, we have trusted all of the various unions and divisions of the world to make some of their own cultural decisions. And it has not created any difficulties within Adventism when it comes to how to implement some policies, how to do something. So, if we've been able to do it for you, world divisions that really do not favor women's ordination, why can't you also allow Western divisions perhaps to do the same thing now when this is a pressing issue for them?" That's when he was booed.
Yeah, see, that's a really good point.
And
Not the
so
booing, but what he had just said.
what he just said, he was saying, we've trusted you,
Yeah.
world fields that are now large, but used to be very small
Yeah.
and dependent on funds coming from the North American division. We trusted you to make the right decisions.
Yeah.
Can't you trust the Holy Spirit to guide other fields to make the right decisions as well?
And they booed him.
And so he was booed. That was a very low moment at the GC there, very, very low. And it was unfortunate was the lack of response from our current church leaders.
Who was chairing that, and what did they say? I remember watching it, but I can't remember what they said.
Who was chairing? I think it was Michael Ryan that was chairing.
What did he say about it publicly?
I mean, he like all comments and applause or booing that had happened before, he said not to do that. I think he was the one chairing the event, and he was fair-handed when it came to that. But I think, given who Jan Paulsen was, I think the response should have been a little bit stronger.
Yeah. Same with when he was at the Autumn Council and he was begging, I implore you to reverse these decisions, these warnings.
That's right. Yes.
Again, it was just met with, okay, well, thanks for your comments. Your 2 minutes is up. Everyone voted for this last year, so it's in now. Mic number 3, thanks.
I realized something, Peter, is that when you are in church leadership in our church, and because of the way it functions, which to me, again, this is another aspect of an Episcopal church governance, when you are a church leader and voted, and you're the president of this, president of that, the chair of this or that committee, you have a lot of wisdom. But the moment you are no longer in that position, you no longer have wisdom. And all of a sudden, the years of experience that you have is kind of forgotten, and you're not really part of the conversation anymore.
Yeah. The reason I wanted to start SDAQ&A before the Glacier View thing, even though I'd left, I saw a valuable thread within Adventism, from ministers to speakers to artists, musicians, people that are involved, writing books, sermons. There's a beautiful thread that I've noticed just in my life as a kind of a person that observes things and loves the arts and creativity. And I wanted to kind of address that by having some kind of a document that's left behind that, mentions people like Bob Wolfgram, who was a great musical influence on people here in the 70s and 80s, because we don't want these people forgotten. And it seems that, like you say, sometimes even the top leader of the Adventist Church can then just be dismissed. And I think the church needs to set up some kind of a really authentic system that doesn't allow, can share the good things, share the bad things. Here's some embarrassing things that happen, and just put it all out there. This is our history, and be proud of it. And remember instead of trying to write books about Canwright and just defame him or defame Des Ford, just say, yep, they're humans and they were part of who we are. Why is there this incredible desire for Adventists and administrators and all Adventists in many ways love to kind of polish Adventism into a nice little kind of package? Is it because they worried so much about what the world thinks about them?
Perhaps. Certainly, there's that. How we are perceived is really part of our worldview. How we understand ourselves. The remnant at the end of time is a special group of people. If it is full of weaknesses and problems and troubles, well, maybe it's not the people that God will use to bring about the end of time. Maybe that's part of our DNA, of our psychology, of who we are as people, and it leads us perhaps to put under the table or put under the carpet some of the skeletons in the closet. So yeah. It's
why I sometimes gravitate to some of the conservative groups, because they they kind of have an authenticity and a no holes barred kind of approach, which is somehow very confronting to start with, but after a while you appreciate that you're not having to read between the lines all the time.
Mm-hmm.
In the 80s, I'm not sure when it was, maybe 85, I was in Canberra and we were having a church retreat, and someone gave me Walter Ray's The White Lie, and I don't know, I must have been 22 or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
When did that book come out?
1980, 81?
Okay, so it would have been fairly fresh.
1980, 81. I got it here somewhere. Yes.
And I could only
about the same time as Desmond Ford.
Yeah. So it would have been, it was before I went to New Zealand, so it would have been the end of 85. Someone just hands it to me and I'm sitting there, you know, and I started reading it. I could only read like 3 or 4 pages, and I couldn't read it again for like another 5 or 6 years. It had such an impact on me because I'd not really questioned Ellen White before. And then, you know, in the 90s, I started looking deeper into this kind of thing. And I remember when YouTube took off and Ankerberg started, you know, some of their shows were put onto that platform. I just loved some of the interviews I heard with Dr. Bill Johnson, with Des Ford, with Walter Martin and Walter Ray. Did you ever meet any of those guys like Walter Ray, the ones that were kind of, and Ron Numbers, the ones that were really the vanguard for kind of showing Ellen White warts and all?
No, I've never met any of them. Again, you know, different generation perhaps, and I did not happen to be where they were giving a conference or speaking. I've had some conversations by email with Ron Numbers. I have met John Butler a couple times, and we've had conversations. Walter Ray, never met him. Des Ford, never met him. You know, you talk about Walter Ray and his book, which comes out at about the same time, so it's kind of a parallel issue to what's happening with Des Ford and his questions. Somebody said to Walter Ray, I think I remember reading some time ago, that if he had chosen a different title for the book and had been less abrasive, less in your face, accusing Ellen White so outrageously of being a liar and deceiver and so on, if he had not done that, if he had toned down the rhetoric a little bit, changed the title, his book would have become mainstream within a few years. And I agree with that. Walter Ray's book, apart from the accusations and apart from the twist that he gives, that the spin that he gives to the issues, he brings up the issue of literary borrowing, plagiarism, of why, not why, but he's bringing the evidence of so many places where it's obvious that Ellen White used material from another author to prepare her own books. And, you know, that had been known for many, many years. It had never been hidden that she did that, but very few people knew that, because as George Knight has presented quite well, you know, 2 or 3 books ago, that was common in her days. Yeah. But there's a mythology about Ellen White that arose in the 1920s, 30s, 40s, 50s, the mythology of the perfect Ellen White, the mythology of an inspired author that is inerrant, does not make any mistakes whatsoever, and a mythology of a person also who basically got everything directly from God. Mm. And that is not the way that the real true Ellen White functioned and put her books together. And for the first time, we've got a person, a pastor who not for the first time, but in a new generation, we've got a pastor who brings this up now in this book, The White Lie. And he gives us examples of that. I mean, some examples stand out much more than others. Let me give you one that he brings out. It's the book Patriarchs and Prophets. If you compare the table of content of Patriarchs and Prophets with a book on the Old Testament written by Alfred Edersheim, his commentary on the Old Testament, I forget the exact title of his book. If you compare the two tables of contents, they're the same, except for a couple titles where the word is being tweaked a little bit. The order of the chapters is the same. The titles of the chapters are the same. And so where did she get that from? Well, she got it from Edersheim, and so on, so on. Fred Veltman, former professor at PUC, did a beautiful study in as much in depth as he could of some of the chapters of The Desire of Ages and compared them with books that she had in her library and could compare, the similarities and differences between the books and so on. Yes, that's how she did her books. And that's what, for the first time, I think, by an Adventist academic press, I published in 2017 this new edition of the book Steps to Christ.
Yes.
This is the Andrews University edition of Steps to Christ. And Steps to Christ is only half of this little book. The rest is commentaries. I have a historical introduction into that book explaining where the book came from. And for the first time, in a non-apologetic way, in a non-defensive way, you've got an academic professor saying to the world church, here it is, folks, Ellen White did not write this book. This book was put together as a compilation done by Marion Davis. In fact, like all of the other books of Ellen White, from about 1850-something until the time she died, none of the books of Ellen White are written cover to cover by her. No, none of them. They all are compilations. They all are readaptations of prior material written here, written there, an article in Signs of the Times, an article in the Review and Herald. It is brought together. It is cut and paste. It is reorganized. It is changed the theme a little bit. It is tweaked, and so on. That's all of her books are like this. And in 1978, Ellen White hires an assistant, Marion Davis. Marion Davis will work for Ellen White for 25 years until she dies in 1904, I think. And Marion Davis basically put together, under Ellen White's supervision here, naturally, all of the books published between 1880 and 1905. It is Marion Davis who put them together with Ellen White's help. So you name them here. Testimonies, volume 5, 6, 7, thereabout, maybe not 7. And then Great Controversy, Steps to Christ, Desire of Ages, Patriarchs and Prophets, Acts of the Apostles. All of these books are compilations that Marion Davis did under the supervision of Ellen White. And that's how she did her books. And so therefore, an attendant question, a follow-up question to all of this is, if that is the way her books came about, then how is inspiration working? And second, what's the purpose of her books? And this is where the mythology of Ellen White of the 1920s to 50s hid all of that information. Because we got to think, to believe that everything that Ellen White wrote or anything that appears in her books had been consciously written by her. And we didn't know that they were compilations of Ellen White, done of prior material of Ellen White. And when I did the special edition of Steps to Christ, I told the history of the little book. In 1890, Ellen White is attending a pastor's meeting in northern Michigan. It's an evangelist type of meeting, gathering, where there is training for pastors and so on. And during the event, some of the pastors say to Ellen White that they would appreciate very much if she could publish a little book on the plan of salvation that they could use in their evangelistic meetings, that they could give, sell, to reinforce what they believe as far as the plan of salvation is concerned. The idea seemed to be excellent to her. She turned to Marion Davis and she said to her, could you work on this? And she did. Marion Davis sifted through all of the material of Ellen White that she was aware of from the early 80s to about 1890, I mean here. And she compiled these 12, later 13 chapters of the book Steps to Christ. She put them together. She did a cut and paste in a scrapbook, a sentence here, a paragraph there, and she collaged them together, reorganized them, and prepared a chapter on repentance, consecration, the love of God, and so on. And that is how we got the book Steps to Christ. In the appendix of this special edition, I tell where all of the sentences of the book come from. Wow. See, we've got electronic databases now. So when I prepared this edition, I typed into the database the keywords of every single sentence of every chapter to try to find where do they come from. And I tried to find the earliest place where this sentence could be coming from. And I think about, I'm estimating about 85 to 90% of the book is coming from some antecedent somewhere. Some material is original. I was not able to find any references to anything that she had written before, but about 90% of the book is coming from somewhere. Yes, that's how she wrote her books.
By somewhere, you're meaning somewhere else that she's written, or from a different
she's
author?
Written. Yes, yeah. Yes. I did not have the time to try to find antecedents in non-Adventist authors. I know they exist. I've got a number of references that I have found from books that she had in her library, but I did not have the time to do that. That's complicated. Not all the books are online. Not all the books have been scanned to be able to do the comparison of two books beside each other. So that's a little complicated, but I know it's possible. There's a pastor here in the US by the name of Kevin Morgan, who has done a detailed study of Steps to Christ, just like I did. In fact, I had done my study before I found out that he had done it before me. But he went one step further and he has found a fair number of non-Adventist antecedents for the book Steps to Christ as well.
Someone might find that link and share it with us.
Yeah. So when Walter Ray, published his findings that she borrowed from other people, it's true, she did. But it was not known. It had been hidden. It had been for various apologetic, defensive reasons. That information had been kept away to perhaps build a persona of Ellen White that became skewed, not accurate. And I think it's time to say that's now how she did her books, and therefore that's now how inspiration worked in her life, and therefore what is the purpose of her books? They're not to be the last word on a particular doctrine or point of biblical interpretation. Her books were meant, like Steps to Christ was meant, to be an evangelistic tool to help pastors teach people what's the plan of salvation about and how do we come to Jesus. What are the steps in our spiritual development with Jesus? That's what the book is about. It's a pastoral tool. And all of her other books have purposes of this kind, to reach out, to help somebody know God better and God's plan for their lives.
Was Fanny Bolton involved with Steps to Christ as well?
Honestly, no, she was not. For a very simple reason. During that year of the summer of 1890 to the summer of 1891, that 1 year during which the manuscript is prepared, Fanny Bolton is not an employee of Ellen White that year.
But
those
she was
12 months or so.
before,
She was before.
and she was
She
after.
she will be after when Ellen White goes to Australia. Fanny Bolton will go as well. And I think if I remember well, Ellen White leaves for Australia sometimes in late summer, summer northern hemisphere here. So we're talking late July, August, September. I'm not too sure when. She goes to Australia later that year. By then, the manuscript is ready. And the manuscript has been sent to the publisher, which is a non-Adventist publisher, by the way.
Mm.
And so Fanny Bolton is not working for Ellen White that year. A rumor or a conspiracy theory, so to speak, began to arise. And I tell the story in the introduction to the book Steps to Christ. After Fanny Bolton died, somebody began the rumor that she had written Steps to Christ and not Ellen White. And Ellen White did not want to give her credit and so on. So that's false. She did not work for Ellen White that year.
Did she play a similar role, though, as Marion Davis in other books, though?
I don't think so. I don't think Fanny Bolton was a literary assistant or an assistant of Ellen White that was trusted to the level that Marion Davis was trusted.
Right.
Ellen White had different levels of trust of people who worked for her, people who understood her mind, understood her approach to scripture, to spiritual life, and so on. Some of her assistants were simply typists. They simply typed. Some of her assistants did the editorial work of recrafting the sentences and paragraphs. And then only one assistant was at the level of Marion Davis. Now, of the books of Ellen White, not all of them, let me rephrase that. There are a couple of the books of Ellen White that were compiled, put together by other people than Marion Davis. The book Temperance, for example, I think if I remember well, was prepared by one of the medical doctors. I want to say Kellogg, but I'm not sure. It could be Paulson or somebody else. I think the book Education, the same thing. An educator put it together, maybe Prescott. And so a few of those books were put together by somebody else. Again, taking material from Ellen White and compiling it during the life of Ellen White. So it's a different kind of compilation than the posthumous compilations done by the White estate.
Why didn't Marion Davis, if she was involved with the other books of was it the Conflict series? Why didn't she kind of sink her teeth into the Great Controversy? That kind of needed a bit of her softening powers.
Well, I think she did to some extent. The first edition of the Great Controversy is Spirit of Prophecy, Volume 4. It's about 700 pages long, and then the book is about this size as well, but it's a black book, so it's a tiny little book, smaller pages, and it covers the history that we know. When Ellen White goes through Europe between 1885 to 1887, Ellen White decides that she would like to expand the book, The Great Controversy, and make it a standalone book instead of being part of a series of 4 books.
Right.
And it becomes the standalone book we know today. And it comes out in 1888. A number of chapters are added, a number of chapters are tweaked, changed, some of the quotes are changed as well, and so on. And then the last edition is the 1911 edition. By then, Marion Davis is dead. And other pastors and scholars at the time helped Ellen White prepare the 1911 edition.
She actually gave some credits, didn't she, in that particular?
She did in the introduction. She did in the introduction. Another thing that I say candidly, and perhaps some people did not appreciate that when the book Steps to Christ came out there a couple of years ago. Candidly, I say, I think we need to be honest to realize that. And this is thank you to Walter Ray. In today's world in which we live, given our own ethical standards when it comes to writing books and publications and so on, in our own world today, what Ellen White did would not be admissible today. borrowing from some other authors without giving credits. But that was not the world of Ellen White. It was not the way books were written in her time.
What about
And
with Conybeare and Howson? Sorry to interrupt.
yeah, same thing with that. That's the book Sketches from the Life of Paul, coming
But
out in
didn't they threaten
1980.
legal action with her?
They did threaten, but I think the legal action was pulled off. Did not go anywhere else.
But she took the book off the shelves. It was no longer made for sale.
That's right. Yeah, and
So
it became the book Acts of the Apostles in 1911, and a very different book from
But
Sketches from the
wouldn't
Life
that
of Paul.
indicate that the times back then were similar to today?
Well, it began to be. Yes, they began to be. Ellen White was not aware of that, and when Ellen White was made aware of the issue with borrowing from other authors without giving credits, that it was unethical, that it made her look like she was deceiving, or maybe something is not ethically right there. She began to understand that she should not do that. Marion Davis helped in that.
Because Marion Davis was a bit concerned, wasn't she, at times? She's expressed in some letters. Can you tell us a bit about her concerns?
I've not read many of those letters, but I've read the concerns that Willie White expressed regarding those issues. And he tried to help his mother understand that you could not do a book like this, that you've got the other one beside you, and you basically change just a couple words in the sentence, and you don't give any credit. As things evolved in the 1870s, 1880s, people began to be aware of this, and that was not a way of writing books anymore. But again, we have issues with that because we've not been candid and honest about telling the entire history of how these books came about. And we should have done that all along. I make a comment in the book that say, in today's world, every edition of the books of Ellen White from now on should have in the preface a comment, a little bit of the history of that book, who helped prepare it, how it was prepared, and what are the other major authors that likely Ellen White used to help her prepare this book. Every new edition of the books of Ellen White should now have this. The world in which we live now should be admitting this honestly, and take care of all these issues and all of these websites that are so negative toward Adventism and Ellen White. Let's honestly agree and reveal that we know about this. We're not going to hide this anymore.
Here.
I think it would help. It would help us a great deal to take care of all this mythology about Ellen White.
Who published that work? The Steps to Christ 125th anniversary?
The Andrews University Press, right here on campus.
Was there any pushback from administrators and politicians in the church? No feedback, that letters sent to you saying you're a bit too honest?
No, I have not. I have not heard any. I've heard of comments being made, but those comments were not made directly to me.
What year was Conybeare Howson that they threatened legal action?
Well, the book Sketches from the Life of Paul came out in 1883, so it would have been after that. But already by then, Conybeare and Howson's book was about 30-some years old. I think the first edition, it's a British book, first edition is 1850-something, 1855 maybe, and then because the copyright is only a British copyright, almost immediately a number of publishers in the United States will steal the book, so to speak, and publish it in the US, and they'll make money out of it. I mean, that's the world of the 1850s, 1860s.
But they won't pretend they wrote it, though. They'll just make money off it from...
That's right. Exactly right.
it.
That's right.
What was the famous story where Ellen said the book was on a high shelf somewhere in her house? Was that an Edersheim book?
No, that's another story. In 1858, Ellen White has a vision of the great controversy. And the vision of the great controversy is about what happens in heaven with the rebellion of Lucifer, how it started, why it started, and how Adam and Eve were deceived by the devil, and how the plan of salvation was put into place by a council between Jesus and the Father, and so on. That's the vision, the great controversy vision, we call it, so to speak. A little later in that summer or fall, Ellen White retells this vision that she has had. And at that point, John Andrews says to Ellen White, "Oh, what you say as you tell your story of the great controversy is very similar to John Milton's Paradise Lost. Have you read this book?" And we're told that she answers no. By the way, the story is told to us by Willie White. And Willie White in 1858 was only 3 to 5 years old. So the story, he could not have known the story. He was too young. So it is a story that is told to him, and then he tells it to us. So how many of the details are forgotten or not mentioned, not too sure here. So a few weeks later, John Andrews comes to Ellen White and he gives him a copy of John Milton's Paradise Lost. She takes the book and she puts it on a high shelf in her kitchen and does not look at it. And then she writes her book, Spiritual Gifts, Volume 1, and tells us in the first few chapters the story of the great controversy in heaven before it begins on earth. Now, the whole story with that book is that, and then Ron Numbers brings this up, and Jonathan Butler brings this up, and a few others also bring it up, is that part of the story there that has not been well studied and well explained is that the book did not stay on the shelf forever, likely. Because in 1870, when Ellen White begins to publish the series of 4 books called Spirit of Prophecy, which is the antecedent to the Conflict of the Ages series. Volume 1 is the equivalent of Patriarchs and Prophets. So it has 4 chapters at the very beginning about the great controversy in heaven and how it starts and how it ends up on earth. If you compare these 4 chapters with John Milton's Paradise Lost, I would say about 90 to 95% of the content is very similar to John Milton's Paradise Lost. I don't know if anybody has ever read John Milton's Paradise Lost. It's not a well-known book anymore. A little hard to read. You've got to get into the rhythm of the prose, or the poetry, in fact, and get into it. But about the events, the geography, the theme, how heaven looks like, the conversations, when you compare it to Spirit of Prophecy, Volume 1, chapters 1 to 4, it's very, very, very similar. That was quite a shock to me when I made that comparison, when I read it.
Like, I've known that story, but the way you've told it and the details have literally shocked me again.
And so that's what's shocking here a little bit. And so again, that raises issues of inspiration. It raises issues of borrowing, but the bigger issue to me, the more relevant issue to me, is what's the purpose of the book? And it is to tell the story of the great controversy. Now, a lot of details of the great controversy that John Milton has.
Shouldn't we ask what's the purpose of the author, not the purpose of the book?
Well, that's it.
Everything out there has been written and is available, so we can kind of find what we need if we seek. So to me, it's not really about stumbling across relevant information. It's about stumbling across people that are giving that information and what their intention is.
Yes, yes. And the intention of Spirit of Prophecy Volume 1, just like it is for Patriarchs and Prophets, it is to tell in a way from a particular perspective, the Adventist perspective, Ellen White's perspective, how she understood the beginning of the great controversy and how the biblical stories of the Old Testament are weaved into this great controversy. You know, a lot of the events alluded to by John Milton and Ellen White are biblical events. What happens in heaven between Lucifer and God, that's Isaiah 14, Ezekiel 28, the fight in heaven between Michael and the other angels, that Revelation chapter 12. You know, there's plenty of details in Scripture that are about a great controversy happening that is cosmic, beyond the earth. But the way it is told, the way it is narrated, the way it is embellished, so to speak, or the details added, because Scripture does not give a lot of details. You know, this is where the parallel is a little surprising.
And I think it's interesting, was it Willie White, did you say, that was retelling the story?
Yes.
It's
about the book you put on a high shelf.
Yeah. It's interesting that regardless of the facts or the accuracy or how old he was or who told him, he told that story in a defense of his mother, and to use the word high shelf to further vindicate her role in the writing of these books just seems a little bit suspicious to me.
Well, perhaps, perhaps, and true. I mean, he would have been defensive of his mother, although on the other hand, I think if we know much about the way Ellen White put her books together and how her assistants helped her, we owe it to Willie White and some of the letters he wrote that have been published. And although he may have been defensive, he was also not dishonest, and we need to give him credit for that. He told the story the way he understood it and the way he perceived it, and I think he was fair to himself and to his mother, and that's okay. I think there's.
I can understand.
We should have continued what he started.
I can understand the wonderful desire and virtue of defending your mother, but it just places a lot of the prophetic claims to me under a shadow. At first a spotlight, and then a shadow emerges for me. Why am I feeling?
I think we need to. I think George Knight brought this up very much in a couple of books ago, that when he talked about the mythology of Ellen White, the construction of Ellen White that happened in the 1920s to 1940s. That's why I say if we had kept being honest, genuine, going the same direction of Willie White, A.G. Daniels, Prescott,
the whole 1919 conference,
1919 Bible conference, if we had kept, being honest about these issues, discussing them, not hiding them, we would not be where we are today. And so, yes, he was defensive. Willie White was defensive, yet at the same time, he's the one who told us how the literary assistants worked for Ellen White.
Is it good though to be where we are today? Like if it's built on these lies that were covered up, and then we've rediscovered what he was saying, and we've had the revelation of the 1919 conference minutes revealed in the 70s, or coming to light again in the 70s.
Yes.
We can say, but providentially we wouldn't have become what we are. But have we become a body of people that are just very good at hiding truths, and ironically call ourselves the church that has the truth? Like, I agree with you. I'm not in any way disagreeing with you. I 100% agree with you, and I really am enjoying this conversation and valuing what you're saying. I'm just wondering at what's going to shake that tree to make that kind of awakening happen, because all I hear is, when I listen to the more conservative bishops, I hear them just continuing on with this 1920s to 1950s style Adventism. They're just perpetuating the myth.
Okay, true to some extent. Hopefully, we're doing better at being a little bit more honest now, and I think we are. I think we've turned the page when it comes to some of these issues. I think they're out in the open sufficiently now that the myths of the 1940s and 50s is probably going to dissipate, and people are beginning to be aware of them, and things are being recast in some ways, and it's happening, and we're grateful for that. A good dosage of honesty and candidness has helped in the last 10 years, perhaps, a little more, much more. I think Des Ford, Walter Ray, Ron Numbers, and some others started, the ball rolling. Now, each of them gave a particular spin on what they discovered and how it changed them and how they interpreted the information. There are different ways of looking at that same information, and that's happening at the moment. I think, and my perspective is just one of them as well. And I hope to be able to build faith and confidence in the writings of Ellen White once you know how they've been put together and the purpose of those writings and why she put together these books and the messages that she had. I think if we get the issues of inspiration and how the book is put together out of the way, then we can read the book and really see the value of what she's trying to say for our spiritual development as an Adventist people. What do we have that is precious as far as biblical truths are concerned that we should share with the world? But there is a hang-up. The hang-up is there's a wall, there's a barrier, and the barrier is issues of inspiration, issues of compilations of the books, and if we could just move beyond that and see the value of what she was trying to say. That's what I've been trying to do in my work with the encyclopedia, with the book Steps to Christ, and in a number of other articles and activities that I've done.
And
I've got another book in my mind here. Once I finish the one on George Butler that I'm working on at the moment, once that one is done, I want to do one on the theology of Ellen White. But at the beginning of that book, I want to clarify those issues, the ones we've been talking about, and then move beyond that.
And look, I think what you're doing is brilliant. Like, honestly, it's fantastic. And I think what Gil Valentine too is what he's doing.
Oh, Gil, yes.
And I can't wait to read John Butler's book, autobiography, when it comes out, if it comes out. We were mocking him about that. I think it's going to come out. I think he's been spurred along. Talking about mothers and son relationships, my mum's watching. Hi, Mum. And she has said, did she have visions from God?
Well, she claims she did. You're asking me the question, and I've never met her. I've never seen her. She died 105 years ago. And so we as Seventh-day Adventists, we accept the claim. We accept her testimony that she had visions. And it's a statement of faith on our part. And we also accept the witness, the testimonies of a huge number of people who were witnesses to her visions when she was in a state of vision publicly, not the dreams of the night here, but the public visions. And we accept their testimonies that they saw her and that when she woke up, she began to say something to the congregation, and some people in the congregation would respond, "Oh, well, she's talking about me. How does she know that?" And so we accept those claims that there was something supernatural happening there.
I've seen psychic mediums do that, like, from the stage. What is the name? Dave Edwards or whatever his name is.
Sure.
Why 100 years later would we think, that she has some special claim to what he did as a bit of a showman's trick? does as a showman's trick, you know. When I watched the movie, is it Tell the World, Go Tell the World?
Sure.
And if this is uncomfortable, I'm not trying to put you on the spot. Tell me to change the topic. It's just a bit passionate for me, this one. And in the movie, which is a very good movie, a friend of mine, well, his wife and my wife are friends, and his kids are the same age as mine. I started a bit late in life, Denny. And the portrayal of William Miller, the portrayal, not betrayal, the portrayal of Ellen White's twin sister is just fabulous. But throughout the movie, there's little moments where, you know, the holding up the heavy Bible, urban myths are presented where she put her fingers in and she's reading the text and someone looks up and goes, oh, she is reading that text. Things that never happened. And here's a sanctioned movie to share to the world. And I think you may have heard me in other interviews when I've shared this story. The guy next to me when I was watching the screening of it said, see, Pete, it did happen. See? And I'm going, this is a movie. That's not evidence, you know. So just because people were there and said, oh, she stopped breathing and she said me. You know, I know people in this town that have made claims to be, you know, giving divine revelations. I've been in meetings where they've made claims and then heard later, a couple of years later, yes, I was there that night and she went into vision and she was holding a hand and she opened a hand and there was a little tiny statue. I was actually at one of those meetings and it didn't happen like that. So the
only thing I think we can say is that something supernatural happened.
How can we say that?
Well,
we can say something providential happened, but how can we claim something supernatural happened?
Because of some of the phenomena that seem to have happened at the same time, the physical phenomena. You know, in those early years, these early pioneers.
But I've just given an example, though, of a physical phenomenon that I was there, and a year later people are saying they were there and this is what happened, and it didn't happen.
Yeah, okay. Well, you know, I wasn't there. So again, I want to be gracious, and I want to be admitting also at the same time that there is an aspect of confidence and faith and trust in what we heard. So apart from the very heavy Bible that some people doubt really happened, or some of the others.
Do you think that happened, the heavy Bible?
There seem to have been some physical phenomena that happened at the same time as she having her visions, or at least being able to say some things that she could recall having seen in a vision, and some people would vouch for that. We take that testimony that something supernatural happened. And I have to leave it at that. And the good that it has done to the people who listen to that.
But people say that about Joseph Smith, and he just used seer stones, you know, and there was a time period where there was lots of people. There was the rapping, there was a Church of not Scientologists, but Church of Science came out of that era as well.
That's right. What's her name?
Why do we believe accounts of her supernatural occurrences, but we defame and mock all the others that seem to have the same kind of anecdotal evidence?
I think you're right. You're raising a good question. I think we need to be careful. And I don't think we need to accept her ministry among us on the basis of these physical phenomena that happened, you know, in her early life. We should not do that. That is not the basis of our acceptance of her as being a voice within Adventism. We accept her as a voice because of what she said, of the guidance that she provided, and it seemed that guidance seemed to be really blessed by God, brought out some very good effects, brought out some beautiful things, like schools here and there. Avondale, you know, your place is one of those. She seemed to have said that she saw something in vision, and that's the good piece of land to buy. Same thing with Loma Linda. the building of some of our institutions and so on. I mean, it's the guidance that she provided. This is what authenticates her as being a good voice, not some of these phenomena that cannot be verified, really. Those are secondary, even tertiary things to validate her authenticity. I don't want to go there.
Yeah.
I don't want to put a lot of emphasis on these phenomena because I know they happened all over the place in the US at the same time. No, I think the message that she carried, what she gave to the church, helped the church become what it has become today. And I think to me, that's an evidence of God's guidance through her life.
A lot of academics and scholars, and I'm not going to ask you this, just so you know, so you can, don't fear that I will. A lot of them are saying that nothing happened in 1844, that the church is providential. When I asked George about the sanctuary and going from holy to most holy, he said, oh, well, that was just a metaphor. We've come well beyond that. And yes, I agree, but we use words like he entered a new phase of ministry. And then I spoke to, I think, John Paulian, and they talk about at the cross, God was vindicated, but 1844 saw the vindication of humans. And I'm asking, well, who vindicated in front of who? And it's like, well, the angels and people on other planets. Where do we get the idea that there are people on other planets? Is that something from the Bible?
Well, okay. I think some of the stories in the book of Job, and they're, depending on how you take those to be literal or just a parable, stories in the Gospels, stories in the book of Revelation, that there are beings that are part of God's surroundings. And so therefore, yes, it is possible that there might be beings in some other places in the universe in which we live, however vast that may be. So you don't need to have a text from Ellen White to believe that. I think there are plenty of biblical passages that hint at that. No, I wouldn't build a fundamental belief on this or put it in a creed, but you could hint at this, yes.
And that's why I'm not asking what you think. I'm saying, what do you think about these conversations I've had as to why these other people may have drawn these conclusions? Because like I think someone was talking lots about metaphors and the metaphor of when presented with this particular version of what may have happened in 1844 that night and the new phase, it's a nice metaphor. And then, but is it a metaphor to confirm the vindication of humans in the age of judgment actually beginning that night? And if there are humans watching to see that vindication, are they really seeing it? Or is that just a metaphor for people observing a metaphor that's turned into a providential, wonderful thing that here we are now with good schools and churches? I think once you start doing the metaphor, I think you've got people who've got to say something happened or it didn't. We made a mistake, nothing happened that night, but hey, we've got some good schools and churches now. Why won't people say that? Why are they trying to justify with metaphors and just double talking? The very liberal people that have got the opportunity to be honest and talk about the honesty that they love and want to see permeate the church, sit here and talk to me, a non-academic, about fluidity of supernatural happenings that may or may not have occurred.
Wait, I can tell you're a musician. You're very poetic.
You do get what I'm saying.
I do.
And you're an honest man.
From my perspective, I think everybody, from perhaps the circles of people that you have interviewed, to some extent, there is certainly a doctrine of judgment in the scripture. that we will be judged, and at the end of time, there's going to be a judgment. And so the concept of judgment is permeating throughout Scripture. In the Old Testament, in the apocalyptic books, Daniel, Revelation, in the Gospels, in the letters of Paul, that's a concept that comes through. When did this judgment begin, or when will it begin? That's part of what that conversation is about with the investigative judgment, or pre-Advent judgment, the way we call it now. What happened in 1844? Again, I wasn't there. And why are colleagues equivocating when it comes to that, and not using the concept of metaphor instead of a clear reality that happened? I think to a large extent, I think people are still a little careful as to how they want to answer some of these questions, because it's still a life or death kind of issue within Adventism.
And that's the truth. That's the real.
I think that's what's
the real
happening.
thing that's going on. Yeah.
I think there's still a sense of you want to tread carefully on some eggs, and that's perhaps one of them. So some words are used to try to explain, the way they feel or the way they understand that, and how they relate to the entire question.
I feel that a lot of liberals go away, oh, that's good, that's awesome, they've explained it, I don't have to think about that anymore. And the very thing that is hinted at, please read between the lines of what I'm saying, is just lost in all of a sudden tree-hugging moment.
But you know what's happening here is that a number of your interviewees in the last couple of weeks, that at least the ones that I've watched, have mentioned that at the time that Desmond Ford brought up some of the issues that he felt needed to be addressed by Adventism, that a fair number of other colleagues believed exactly like he did, or at least were going in the same direction, maybe not in all the details. And a few of the big names have been mentioned to you: Edwin Heppenstall and Raoul Dedren, both professors right here at the seminary. In fact, when Raoul Dedren retired, I took his position.
Oh, wow.
I'm the one who was hired to not replace him, but let's say to take his spot there in the department. And
wow.
And so, and people like Raoul Dedren, who would say if Des Ford had not brought it up and made a big issue of it, the whole thing would probably have died out within 20 years or so.
Can I just say something to that, which I didn't say the other day, is I don't believe that would have happened. It would have come back, guaranteed. It's the Ellen White called it the foundation, the central pillar on the foundation. It's going to come back, no matter what. We could all be quiet about it for 40 years and it'll suddenly rear its head again, because someone like me will bring it up.
The big problem with Adventism is that we are 176 years old since 1844. That is the problem that Adventism needs to wrestle with. We have been on this earth probably for 150 years too long. And therefore, it has been impacting generation after generation how we relate to some of our beliefs, some of our key doctrines, particularly the ones ironed out by the very early pioneers, Joseph Bates, James White, and John Andrews. This trio of the three of them really ironed out a fair number of our key doctrines. And they were good doctrines if Jesus returned within about 20 years. And now, 150 years later, after that period of time is over, we're still here. And there is no doubt that the Adventism of the future will exist, will be thriving, if it has a good answer to the delay of the second coming of Jesus. And I think Des Ford and many others were trying perhaps to address some of these issues in their particular ways by looking at particular texts of scriptures, eschatology, and what we say regarding the second coming of Jesus. This is part of the reality. And to the extent that we don't deal face on with the delay of the second coming of Jesus, we're still talking about things that happened 176 years ago.
I think what's
And
great. I think what's great about your contribution to this is that book, the 125th anniversary, Steps to Christ, and other works that you're on. People will come across that stuff. You know, they're gonna be confronted with the truths of Ellen White's copying. So what's good about it is it's keeping, and I'm hoping people in 100 years' time stumble across some kind of media that still holds these these interviews, just to keep things open. You know, like already I'm seeing interviews and podcasts and different shows where I'm just, like, do we have to have another nice apologetic kind of presentation of Adventism from every single facet of Adventism? Let's get a little bit messy. Let's put this stuff on the table. Let's dissect it. Let's have some good, robust discussions. And like you and I, we're having some robust discussion here. But I guarantee if we lived down the road from each other, we'd have an awesome lunch tomorrow and have a great laugh. Like, I love this kind of stuff. But boy, I think it's pretty rare in the Adventist church. It just seems like it's just one big apologetic 3ABN to, let's focus on Jesus. Let's bring it to Jesus. And that's all great stuff, but not if it's the only thing, The only thing is, it's got to be a plate of potatoes and dessert and all sorts of stuff and drop a bit of food on the floor. I don't know, I'm a bit frustrated. Carol has written about your comment, how you weren't there at the time. She's about 1844, and she said, well, none of us were in heaven to know. And that's true, and yet Adventism is basing its whole religion on the claim to know what happened that night. Okay.
So, just pausing there for a moment as I bring up today's sponsor, Test the Prophet. And I tell you what, the more you look into Adventism, if you've been listening right from the word go of this this conversation, is Adventism appears to be one big hot mess. And I really respect, particularly this is, as I mentioned, 6 years ago, this interview you're listening to. We've just jumped from 2020 back to 2026. And Dr. Denis Fortin talks about if the church would just be a bit more honest and reveal some of these things, it would be in a better place. And 6 years later, Dr. Denis Fortin, Ron Grable, George Knight, many of the names mentioned in today's program, tried to be a bit more honest. And I'd love to chat to Denis Fortin now. Hopefully he's watching. Come back on the show. I really enjoy our conversations. But it seems to me as bleak as ever, the conversations that began 1919, 1957, 1980. A lot of the work that Gillian Ford has done, releasing a lot of material. These conversations are not leading to the church being more honest. And here's what I think. If they did lead to more open and honest discussions, what would be revealed is that Ellen G. White was a false prophet. So there's a bit of an interesting point there. The administration knows this. The more traditional Adventists know this. If the truth is revealed, you got to ban it. This book was banned within 6 days of its release. Sharing a real truthful view of Ellen White, when you do, it's pounced upon and you are banned, because the leaders know, the traditional Adventists know, that if you breathe in honesty into the Adventist church, it reveals Ellen White to be a false prophet, or at the very least, very unethical. We raised the topic of Connie Berenhausen, and I think Denis was saying that it was in about 1880 or something like that. Well, Ellen White had a further 35 years to rectify the unethical behavior, but she didn't. She continued on with the process she had always relied on. Copy other people, paraphrase, get her secretaries to make it look pretty, compile a whole bunch of stuff to make it look like a book, pretty it up. When Adventism's honesty is revealed and reclaimed, it reveals lipstick on a pig. And today's sponsor is Test the Prophet. And as I mentioned, sadly, Test the Prophet has left the planet. He has passed away in the last couple of days. And it is really sad, really sad. But he has left behind 5 to 7 YouTube clips. If you go to Test the Prophet on YouTube, you will find this channel, and you will find a clearly presented challenging of Ellen G. White with incredible questions, incredible research. So I highly recommend that you guys go and see this, because you will realize that when the truth is revealed, the prophet is left standing with not much to show for her alleged good works and efforts. And so if you use the claim, but she saw this, and let's put the supernatural stuff aside and the supposed miracles of holding up the Bible, let's put all of that aside, and let's look at, hey, Avondale College got started, and Loma Linda, and there's these hospitals and schools. So what? Joseph Smith did the same. Plenty of fake, false prophets have done the same. Good things have manifested from their advice. Go and watch Test the Prophet. Wow, an incredible channel. I've watched all of the videos there several times, and I'm going to really miss seeing in the comments Test the Prophet making a comment and engaging with us. So yeah, he is the sponsor of today's program, and we're going to do the best we can to keep his legacy front and center. Back to the program, back to 2020.
Tell us a little bit about the book you're working on, and then remind us again of the one you said you wanted to do after that.
I am currently writing one of the biographies of the pioneers that George Knight started a good 15 years ago, and I'm doing the one on George Butler, General Conference president a couple of times in the 1870s, and then after James White died in the 1880s until 1888. So he is a controversial General Conference president, at least been demonized a lot, I think, or at least negatively talked about as one of the titles of the books that reflects perhaps his personality. He's been called a rugged heart. For not believing in Jesus and in salvation by faith in some of those, perspectives. So I'm writing a biography on him. I'm probably 3/4 done, 2/3 for sure, 3/4 probably I'm done. Hopefully it will come out 2022, 2023, by
Okay.
the time I'm done. He's a prolific writer.
Really?
Some years he would write, dozens and dozens of letters, and we still have them. So there's a huge amount of correspondence to sift through, to get to know him, to get his personality, which has never been done. Nobody really knows the man himself. So I'm trying to dig this up and present things from his perspective, not somebody else's perspective, but his.
Yeah,
So
okay.
that's a beautiful project. I've had a lot of fun doing this, learned a lot about Adventism, and about Ellen White too, and his relationship with Ellen White. And
Yeah.
that will be very intriguing to a lot of people once it comes out.
Yeah,
So,
make sure you let us know, because if if it's still going, people may decide not to let me interview them after they hear a few of these interviews. I think that's why Gil Valentine's not coming on. And I know Gil from when I was a boy, great guy, great guy. What he and Kendra do just blows my mind. In fact, when you were talking earlier, I thought I'd love to line up your work on Butler, his on Prescott. Did he do one on Andrews?
we did the one recently on Jan Andrews. They're beautiful.
Andrews, and the one that John Butler's going to write, and also Ron Numbers is working on one on Kellogg. I would love to put those 5 or 6 books together and just read them back to back. I think, I think by the time yours is out, that my dream might be able to come to fruition.
Hopefully.
If you ever want to release a work as an audiobook, let me know, because I'm going to set up a site here where some of the authors that are being interviewed are going to do that, and we're just going to have, some of their, because a lot of people are right into audiobooks now as well.
Yeah, okay, yes. Now, all the books though have copyright issues, so yeah.
Yeah, I've discovered though that a lot of publishing contracts don't include, they are now, but existing ones don't actually have the audiobook written in. My sister's an author, and she's been able to do an audiobook totally separate of her publishing contract.
Yes.
A couple of questions. Robert Cook's going to sleep. Good night, he says. Night, night. This possum needs to sleep.
Yeah, it's 10:30 for you here. Yeah.
Yeah. A beautiful friend of mine, Anne Rowenfeld, has written, "It actually hurts to hear a lot of this," and I just want to say to Anne, my heart goes out to you. It hurts me to even talk about this stuff still, and I just want to reassure you that I love you heaps, and let's do lunch very soon. She lives just down the road at the retirement village there. Yeah, these topics do cause a bit of feelings to kind of come through, don't they? Russell Schultz has written the Butler one. He's looking forward to that. It'd be good to see the man behind the stories, and also he's looking forward to reading the Prescott one by Gil as well. David Potter has written, that should make very interesting reading, the list of books I just suggested then as well. Now, one young guy, he's training to be a minister, and he has asked, do you think that if Des Ford's PUC forum and even the Glacier View manuscript, the 991-page one, was published today with all we've known and the studies surrounding Ellen White, etc., would Glacier View have gone in a different direction? It's quite a good question. Thanks, Lance.
I don't know how to rewrite history.
Yeah.
We are who we are today because of what happened in the 1970s and early 1980s. What our church leaders decided 40 years ago had some impact on how we have lived our lives as Adventists since then. So today we're able to have this conversation, to talk about these topics in the way we do, and they have the emotional impact on people who are listening because of what happened 40 years ago. if it had not happened 40 years ago, we wouldn't have this conversation today. Maybe we would have some different issues. That's part of historical theology, and what I do as a professor is that what we think, what we decide, what we act upon, generations ago has an impact on future generations. And it cannot be any otherwise. This is what God uses. This is the humanity of the church. This is the way things are. And God and the Holy Spirit work in ways that have to adapt to the decisions that we make. And that's what it is. So what else could it be?
Yeah. And I guess he's kind of saying maybe a lot of what Des was saying then is quite accepted now. Maybe it wouldn't have even come to as a head like it did. I would probably say that it would, because the people are still very scared to speak too openly about anything to do with the sanctuary, investigative judgment, and the authority of Ellen G. White. So I think, Lance, I know you were asking Denny there, but my little 2 cents worth is I think the same thing would happen again, because even the view that Des preaches on righteousness by faith, justification, it still has a little kernel of questioning the authority of Ellen White in there.
Well, perhaps that could be a conversation for another time, but Des brought up a couple of good concepts there when it came to righteousness by faith and justification by faith that are fully integrated in some of us who are teaching the doctrine of salvation today.
Yeah.
But that's a longer conversation, I think.
Just quickly, and we'll wrap it up in 5 minutes. Russell has said, can we ever rise beyond our history, or will it always determine who we are?
I don't think so. I don't think we can rise from our history. We cannot forget it. We can ignore it and make the same mistakes again. But no, we cannot rise above. We cannot live without it. Let me say it this way. It will always have an impact upon us. Whether it is acknowledged or not, it will have an impact. This is just the way life is. Yeah.
I'd love, if you make a note, to have a listen to Rick Ferre's interview, Bob Wolfgram's interview,
okay,
Dr. Lyndon Rogers' interview, and the one I was going to say first off. Anyway, it'll come to me. I've got to think of who it is. It's important. Anyway, those three will give you a bit of an insight into some of the sociological perspectives that some of the people in the group have had on it as well. Okay. And there's another one. If it comes to me, I'll write it in the link.
Yeah, write it in the chat.
Yeah. Because I love how you've not just been someone that's watched the interviews. You're actually really well known to the community, but you're down amongst it, just commenting and writing. People really value that you're doing that. Can you just, before we finish, I'd love to have you back again, because there's so many topics I want to talk to you about, and one of them, just can you touch on Cottrell? If people want to kind of dig deeper into his kind of legacy, where would people go to find out more information about him and some of the stuff he's written? Because he seems to be such a fascinating figure in all of this, but doesn't always rise to the top of the cream.
That is true. I know the name. I know who he is a little bit, but I have not delved into a lot of his writings. He's an intriguing figure because of some of the beliefs that he had. He was one of those with Dedren Heppenstall, who had basically those views, and therefore kept his employment. And he was vocal about them too. I would not know exactly where to go. I wonder if the research center here at Andrews would have some files on him and some of his writings somewhere. I'm sorry, I cannot answer the question.
I'd love to do a SDAQ&A traveling roadshow and come to Andrews, and you could show me around and take me to some of the vaults.
Oh, yeah, there's a lot of good stuff here.
Oh, I remembered who the other person was. It was the first person on my list was Harry Ballas. He's done his doctorate on on Adventist ministers leaving around the time. So Harry, Rick, Bob Wolfgram, and Lyndon Rogers is a really good one. There's another one that's escaped me just for the moment, just to cover the topics we've talked. Anyway,
Perfect. I'll look them up.
hey, look, I've really enjoyed our conversation. I hope I haven't pushed any lines there at all and jeopardized our future friendship with asking any hard questions.
No, definitely.
So it's been a real thrill to get to know you, and thank you so much for being part of this resource that we're building, and we really value your contribution to the broader Adventist community and to your pastoral care within the group of SDAQ&A.
Thank you for inviting me. I hope my contribution will be helpful now and in the future.
Yeah,
I'll go on the chat also and double check all the comments that have been made.
that would be great.
And maybe answer some of them. So
Yeah.
thank you for having me.
And if you stick around a minute, I'll tell you how many people were watching tonight. I always find that's a really interesting thing because we've had very high numbers, so that's been great. And people are doing the big love hearts. That's nice to see too. Thank you very much, Denis. Really appreciated it. Like I say, stick around a minute, and but for everyone else, we'll see you next time. Big week, by the way, this week. Another 4 interviews to go. It's my second biggest week of interviews. I think there was one that I did 6 in 1 week, and they're all 2.5 hours long. And so I very much appreciate people's support. Thank you very much.
So we'll leave one of Peter Dixon's long goodbyes. Actually, a lot of these interviews that I did back then, and something doesn't really happen now, but back then we would end the live but continue chatting, and some of the conversations go for like half an hour or more, and we would chat beforehand for quite a bit as well. And so a lot of the season 2, there's really interesting conversations happening that were recorded but didn't go live. So maybe one day I'll release the whole lot. See how we go. Thank you for watching today, everybody. It was a very informative conversation, and number 38 of our 86 re-release season 2 being uploaded for the first time to the public outside of our private group. So I'm looking forward to going through and reading some of the chat as well. And tomorrow we have, I think, let me just check. Good News Fellowship is definitely on. At Thursday, 5:30 p.m. California time, or New South Wales, Sydney time, 12:30. And then and I think, let me just check, I think Connie French is going to be our guest speaker tomorrow. And she's just had, has mentioned to Danny that she's just had a mind-blowing spiritual experience, and she's wanting to share that. So tomorrow she is our Good News Fellowship guest. Go and find the link to that. And immediately, or within about 20 minutes of when that finishes, 2 p.m. New South Wales on Friday, 7 p.m. Pacific time Thursday, Rochelle Anonymous will be running SDAQ&A Book Club. So there's lots going on. And next week we will be having myself and Rodrigo Custodio will be doing a tribute to Tess the Prophet. I think it's going to be around at the same time as today's show started, and it was such sad news to hear of his passing. So we're going to do a tribute to him. I think we're going to be allowed, we're just checking with his wife, I think we're going to be allowed to share photos of him, his real name. While he was living, he just didn't want to put himself in the firing line. His material is so powerful. He would have just been, met with so much pushback. And he's married with a couple of kids. So it's just sad all around. But there'll be a lot of information shared about him. And I just want to, honor his legacy and thank him posthumously, is that right, for sponsoring today's program. Test the Prophet. Go and check it out. Go and check it out on YouTube. Well, hopefully see you all tomorrow, and very much look forward to Good News Fellowship. See you then.